Well, hello and welcome to our most recent webinar from CODA. So my name is Francis Norman. I'm CEO Managing Director here at CODA. I'm absolutely delighted and very much looking forward to this particular webinar. We're going to hear about marine solutions for offshore decommissioning from Bhagwan Marine with Peter Carmichael as the presenter. Just before I hand over to Peter to talk us through his presentation, if you have any questions that you'd like to be asked of Peter, if you could put them into the chat, please. When we get to the end of the presentation, we'll then go through a Q&A with Peter and put him on the spot and get all of the answers to all the questions that maybe don't get picked up as we go through the presentation. So on that, I'll hand over to you now, please, Peter, if you want to take it from here, please.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Francis. And thank you, everyone, for your time and dialing in today. So, thanks, everybody. And my name is Peter Carmichael. A bit about myself. I've been with Bhagwan Marine now for 20 years. And during that time, I've worked on our vessel fleet throughout various projects and been in our office here in our Perth office since about 2013. And sort of been through the roles of operational superintendent, ops manager, general manager of operations, and now I'm the executive general manager of strategy and business development. So, yeah, it's a great pleasure to be able to come on here with CODA and Francis and talk a bit about not only Bhagwan, but our role in decommissioning. So I'll start off with Bhagwan Marine. And Bhagwan is an unusual name. And a lot of people ask how we really got the name Bhagwan or where Bhagwan came from. So as this isn't just local community and people that have all heard about us in the previously and a lot in our local scene, I thought I'd sort of paint that picture for the broader global audience. So Bhagwan, basically we're a founder and visionary led company. We were started by Louis and Karen Kanikoski back in the late 90s. The Bhagwan name itself comes, it comes from the Sanskrit ancient language of India, and it's one who possesses divine qualities or supreme qualities. In the Hindi or the Hindu tradition, Bhagwan's commonly used to refer to as God. So back in the mid-80s, Louis Kanikoski was driving around on his crayboat in Geraldton, and the crayboat's name was Bhagwan. Not so much based on the Sanskrit ancient Indo-Aryan language of India, but more on the Hindu tradition of God, because Louis fondly thought of himself as one of the gods of crayfishing. So here he was driving around on the Bhagwan crayboat, setting his pots and catching his lobster, some of the best lobster in the world, the Western Red Rock lobster. And during that time, he was watching all these huge structures leave the port of Geraldton. These structures, in fact, were the jackets and topsides of Thevenard Island's Yamati, Cowell, and Saladin platforms. So it was around that time that Louis thought to himself, wow, there's another world out there, not just crayfish and craypots. So then it was a little bit past then, around 1998, that in one of the off seasons, Louis and his father and a couple of others drove their crayboat from Geraldton up to Onslow, and they were bought on hire through the off season of crayfishing as one of the field boats in the Thevenard Island field, and they were actually out there doing the field service work for those platforms that he's seen back in the late 80s. A lot of time went on from there. Oh, sorry, not a lot of time went on there, but a couple of years later, in 98, at the start of 2000, Louis decided to look at a business and career in the offshore world. So that's when the name Bhagwan Marine was registered, and the company began as a energy and oil and gas marine and subsea solutions provider. So it was back around the early 2000s that the company started. Bhagwan was the name, and we grew from there. We rode the tailwinds of extreme sort of construction periods in the energy world, when some of the largest global construction projects here in Western Australia were being carried out. This was Gorgon Phase 1 and also Chevron's Wheatstone project in Onslow. both of those running concurrently towards the end of construction of phase 1 of Gorgon and the start of the Wheatstone project. So it was pretty busy times. It allowed us to, like I said, ride the tailwinds of growth and really diversify our business as well. So then that's when Bhagwan as a company started looking at and diversifying into the other industries. But it's also where sort of around that late or early 2000s where we really started in the offshore energy decommissioning phase. So that's a little bit of an intro on Bhagwan, the name, where we started, Louis and Karen as our visionary and founders. And now we'll jump more into our slideshow. So back to that, we were lucky enough to go through, like all industries, cyclic phases of growth, and through the construction phases. Then we did go into a bit of a industry downturn, let's say around that 2014, where we were lucky enough to diversify, and we had other areas of our business in the ports and inshore, like over in on the other side with some tug and barge work for major infrastructure upgrades that allowed us to weather those storms. And then wind the clock forward, you'll see here we listed on the ASX in July 2024. So we're able to really rebuild our place in the industry and get to a stage where we could list our business. That really allowed us really to strengthen balance sheets and look at further growth in the future. So that's kind of where we are. That part of our life is at infancy stages. I think we're not quite in our second year, and it's a bit quite exciting and allows us to sort of look at the real growth in our operating sectors. Like I said, today we'll be concentrating mainly on our business in the energy and resource sector, and top of our priority in that one is the decommissioning industry. I think although there's construction projects on, it's not like that lead up until 2014. We're going now into sort of more of this mid-phase in the energy sector. Through the transition from oil and gas, we're seeing now a lot of these older oil assets being decommissioned. So very important to us to remain a part of that in supporting our not only oil and gas major clients and energy clients, but tier 1 contractors as well. We'll get a bit more into the details of some of our fleet, our executive management and leadership team. We have a lot of many years of experience throughout our team here. And even as far as our latest merger and acquisition with a third generation Australian-owned marine company, Riverside Marine, who operates 5 separate brands or businesses within, and the managing director of that, Angus Campbell, on the right. We're also lucky enough to bring Mark Anand on board, our Chief Operating Officer, about 12 months ago, and Mark brings a wealth of operating experience through some of these drilling companies by the likes of Baker Hughes and Schlumberger. And you can see up there, Karen Kanikoski and Louis is not on that page. And myself and Cheryl, our CFO. So, yeah, as we diversified, like I said, we've sectorized our business for growth. We look at here our diversified, differentiated business model. I like to call it our strategy house, and our bespoke targeted customer solutions being one of our value propositions. Our strengths, on the left there, that really sort of drives our services that we provide, which are marine services, subsea services, our vessel charters, and project delivery. So when we look at complete project delivery in some of these decom spaces, we've collaborated with local and global providers to deliver safe, efficient decommissioning solutions. Quick snapshot geographically around Australia. We've got quite a strong presence. As we know, most of this decommissioning work will be done more around the Western Australian side, up to the Northern Territory and all the way around to the Otway Basin and into the Bass Strait. We have a head office here in Perth. We have quite a large presence up in Dampier, Northern Territory, now with the acquisition of Riverside, also in Townsville, Mackay, Brisbane, both head office for our Eastern States operations, and Riverside remain over there in Brisbane. And we also have quite a strong presence in Melbourne and operate the Port of Melbourne maintenance contract for the port there, and are also actively, looking at future opportunities in that decom space in the Bass Strait. Large multifunctional fleet. Although Bhagwan don't have high-tech subsea cutting tools, we do have a vast variety of vessels that can accommodate those types of tools, and that's kind of where we bring our best into the mix. Probably one of our flagships is our DSV, offshore support vessel and diving vessel, the Dryden. She comes equipped with not only a small hospital but hyperbaric chambers, full working class ROV, and nitrox diving ability up to 50 metres. We've used that vessel in many decommissioning applications, the most recent being the diving and cleaning of the Northern Endeavour. And I'll get into a bit more detail on that further. I think I use that as one of the examples in one of the case studies. All the way through to our multi-cats, our smaller CTVs, some of our larger supply vessels. Really, our fleet is designed for our rugged, harsh, littoral zone conditions of our beautiful country, Australia. So our fleet is shallow water, a lot of it shallow water designed for that shallow water littoral zone activities, allowing us to get in and out of some of these waterways, ports, rivers, etc. There was historically our ability to service some of these shallow water, large module sort of tug and barge operations, seen us send 5 of our boats, 2 of our multi-cats, 3 of our shoalbusters, all the way to a project in the Sakhalin Islands of Russia. And we mobilised these vessels under their own steam. We used one of them as a chase boat, and the other 2 towed each other. That was an exciting contract, although it was in a construction phase over there. It was still showed our real strength in being able to sort of support big, large-scale projects in challenging shallow water and littoral zone conditions. So yeah, very vast fleet. The fleet's only growing as well now with the acquisition of Riverside. We'll go into a bit more around our highly experienced team. Again, those numbers have now increased with our recent merger and acquisition. But our manning on our vessels does swell and contract through projects and different things. But a lot of the time, we'll have up to 1,000 marine personnel and over 130 office staff around Australia. A bit more about Bhagwan Dryden. I briefly touched on her earlier, where she was a little bit before her time. She's in our innovation technology piece here, because when we built her, she was built with corpse battery ability to basically become intrinsically safe in a gas cloud situation when working within 500 metre zones of some of these gas facilities. So she had the ability to switch off and go full electric and come out without any spark or ignition. We've never had to use it in haste. However, more recently, we've looked at the retrofitting or changing of these battery setups to be more carbon efficient, so we can use it for hotel services on the boat, etc. We've also, and I think on our next page, we've started exploring the beautiful world of remote operations as well. We have a custom-built vessel, the Ada Clara, that comes equipped with a small observation class ROV, and both the vessel and ROV can be fully autonomously operated out at the Capability X's facility out in Nangara. So very exciting as we move in not only to the energy transition, but also into this new world of remote and autonomous operations. It becomes, a very exciting little ecosystem there with what we're seeing. Sustainable operations. Yeah, Bhagwan's always been committed to our sustainable operations in all manners and aspects of that meaning. Not only sustainable in our growth, but sustainable in our environmental approach as well. We're one of the first local marine companies to get ISO accreditation in not only quality but environmental and in management systems. So our 3 ISO accreditations that will probably pop up later on in this. We still operate probably the most amount of vessels for a local marine operator in Ovid at the moment. We used to have over 50 of our vessels currently in offshore orbit. There's probably not quite as many as that at the moment. That would have definitely been through the growth phases of construction of both Barrow and Wheatstone. And there you go. There's our accreditations there. We also have multiple of our vessels that hold current safety cases not only for NOPSEMA, but also for demurs. So that allows us to be able to look at some of these, although a lot of the decom work you'd think wouldn't need these active safety cases because they have been, removed of petrochemicals. A lot of the time due to those acts, that's not the case. So these things are still required. So now we're getting a bit more targeted into the decommissioning world and how Bhagwan Marine has been a part of that. So again, when we looked at our sectors, decommissioning at the moment sits sort of right at the top of our subsegment and priority in supporting our not only tier one contractors but our energy majors. What makes us different? We're not a single site contractor. We have internal ability to put together complex project teams that can deliver really good results, not only on safety but deliverables. We can partner with not only some of our local but also global contractors, again, to deliver turnkey solutions and bespoke solutions to our clients. End-to-end support. So Bhagwan, and I could probably put this into a bit more perspective. Like I said earlier, when I was sort of on the boats for Bhagwan Marine, I think it was probably as early as 2011. So still the big construction projects were happening. But I was driving one of our vessels, the Bhagwan K, out of Exmouth, and we used to take the crew out to the Griffin turret riser. That was after the Griffin Venture had left. So every 3 months we'd take the crew out there and would do some maintenance, or they would do the maintenance. But it was, one of those days we took them out there when we actually found turret mooring was no longer on the surface, and it had sunk and sat vertically upright on the bottom. So we had the ability to zip in, grab a small suitcase ROV, come out, back out there, confirm that was the case. And of course it was a uncomfortable phone call for the let's call him the lead of the maintenance team to ring Houston and let them know that had happened. But then after that, it remained there for a little while. Of course, it had been plug and abandoned and it was toxin free then, so it remained in situ for a little while. But then that also led into some of the first rigs to reef activities. So we were involved in mid-level buoys, towing those in. Those mid-level buoys then came into Exmouth. They were cleaned and got made ready for an artificial reef that was put in then in the Exmouth Gulf. Artificial reef now, probably over 10 years ago, attracts some fantastic pink snapper these days. So it's a really good local attraction for not only diving but fishing in the Gulf of Exmouth. So all of these we can see on the screen now, in some way, shape or form, Bhagwan Marine supports. All the way through to a complete turnkey support solution, which I'll probably get into a bit more detail in the next slide when I look at the TVI case study. But yeah, I think it was a good example to be able to sort of show Bhagwan's early interaction in the decommissioning space, all the way from the basically very early 2000s. A quick snapshot of a couple of our previous scopes. We engaged local contractors to provide VI with a good solution for the initial support for the Harriet Joint Venture, or HJV, P&A well intervention campaign, where we brought in small jackups. We had a safety case not only put on the jackup but on our vessels as well, and supported the team there for Santos. The more recent one that I mentioned was the Northern Endeavour with the Dryden and our divers. Some pretty hard work out there when you're manually cleaning the sort of fouling that was on that vessel. Thevenard Island, probably our biggest piece to showcase thus far to date. It was a really great example of effective collaboration for a great safety result and result of removing the platforms from Thevenard Island. But a good, also very good example of that through all phases. So we've supported Chevron since the early 2000s. That particular project, we helped and supported them through the P&A campaigns. Our tugs helped put in, large jackups like the 107 through their drilling and abandonment and wirelining campaigns. We then assisted with the fabric maintenance and ongoing maintenance of, and I'll jump back to that slide because that really sort of answers all of these. We supported taking their people out for fabric maintenance. While that was happening, as a job like Thevenard Island, when we look at decommissioning, not only has onshore factors, but also offshore factors. So they have all their onshore tanks where we assisted with bringing all that material ashore once it was pulled down on island. While that was happening, we utilised our smaller CTVs, like I said, to take the fabric maintenance people out. Then we were awarded as the Tier 1 contractor to bring together the team to carry out the TVI platform removal scope. Then during that or just after that, we were using one of our landing craft to take all the plants over to the island through the revegetation stage. So it's a great example and showcase of how we sort of supported throughout what we can see on that screen there. Hoping that the ASLEF surveys and then some of the subsea infrastructure removal bits and pieces also will be sort of what we would be looking at a next phase. I've spoken around that. So yeah, the Thevenard retirement project, it's seen us, like I said, some of these assets we don't have in-house all the time, so we'll outsource those. In this particular circumstance and project, we outsourced 120 metre 8-point moored heavy lift and accommodation barge. She done the majority of our lifts. However, we did cut the jackets and topsides down to a point where I think one of the largest lifts was only around 300 tonne or sub that. So we sort of reduce risk and heavy lift planning by bringing it down to smaller loads. We had anchor handlers out there. We had our sort of smaller, shallow water anchor handlers, as well as the larger supply vessels, CTVs, and we were bringing this equipment in through to one of our local port operators as well through OMSB. And the project went really, really quite well. There was extremely, over 850,000 man hours with LTI free. So it's something that we're really proud of here at Bhagwan in being able to carry out such complex projects with so many man hours in such extreme conditions with no LTIs. The monopods, it also highlights challenges within decommissioning as well. As opposed to the as new world where we're putting in new components, there's always a challenge or an unknown when it comes to decommissioning. When we've got our subsea divers and we're on the hook for quite large demurrage, and we've got our subsea divers using diamond wire saws, and we're making cuts through monopod sleeves. They're meant to be not much inside them, and then we get into the middle and they're full of Rio bar and concrete. These are the sort of things that are not as planned and have to be adapted to, during the project and considered. There was a few little surprises during that, but nothing that stopped us and nothing that didn't keep the job on track. And you can see from that slide there a few more details. The Northern Endeavour, again, more recently, we were out there with the Dryden, over 820 hours of dive time, over 10,000 square metres of square surface area of hull. And the reason, and I've been asked this question in another forum, why in today's day and age when we have, drone technology or umbilical type ROV technology where we can put a cleaning device on the hull and do it that way, why wouldn't we do that? Well, unfortunately, the fouling was that heavy on this hull. That wasn't an option. And the only way to do it was good old-fashioned and elbow grease and extremely high-pressure powered equipment underwater. So that's what we did. And again, another successful completion of a project. Now, I think that brings us sort of towards the end of my slides. And I think the last one is the end slide. That one shows Exmouth Gulf and intermobilisation through a decom project. Another great picture. But what I'll do, Francis, is we'll leave it on this slide here, and I'll come back to you and see if you've got any questions.
Oh, I've always got questions, Peter. I've always got questions, mate. I'll use this as a prompt as well to anybody that has questions now that Peter's gone through his material. Please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as and when they appear. While everyone's pondering or realizing that all the questions that they had you've already answered for them, Peter, I'll start out with a couple for you here. You've talked. First off, thank you very much for that. It was really interesting just to see the span of what you've got, the portfolio, the fleet, if you like, of solutions that you've got, and the flexibility that comes with. When you think about decommissioning and where we are now and where we're heading out into the future and the experiences that you folks have had, where do you see the biggest challenges in terms of just dealing with the work that we've got now, from a marine fleet operator's perspective, or even more broadly as well, if you have thoughts that way?
Look, I think, to be quite honest, I don't think anything's too challenging. I think we like to be able to provide solutions to the most challenging circumstance. So, outside of bottlenecking of some of our ports through exports, and no one wants to decom waste at their port. They want all the shiny stuff that's bringing in our GDP. But I think outside of some of those larger issues around not only bottlenecking of some of our ports, but trying to select the most geographically located options to try and reduce carbon and things like this as well. Like I've heard, and I'll probably pass back to you as well, Francis, around, some of the studies you've done, on some of these port opportunities and options. And I know, for instance, Bunbury's been discussed, and I sort of look at that and I think, the bulk of this stuff that needs to be decommed in an energy sense, offshore oil and gas, is up on the North Shelf, and that's why I'm really excited to see some of the progress from the likes of OMSB and others that have got some really good ideas around more localized areas of use. I think as well, it's around collaborating effectively. It's around learning lessons from our neighbours overseas, and trying to apply those here best we can. Not just lessons learned, but also collaborating effectively with those companies where needed. A good example is what we're looking at in Bass Strait with Esso and now sort of some of Woodside's assets. Of course, I think 19 large platforms in about 50 metres of water, pretty large topsides and jackets, and we're going to look at an amazing vessel, being the pioneering spirit that's going to come and do that. Of course, we'd love to be there to supporting that project with our local experience and our local knowledge in Port of Welshpool and all through that area. But it's interesting to see some of these options that some of these larger global players have. I mean, when we're going to, I can't wait to watch them, lift these things in situ, massive lifts, bringing them up. Then we just need to make sure that these things come in, back to our shore. So, our local industry stay supported on a national level through the work that the decommissioning industry is going to produce.
Yep, very good. Thank you. I'm going to ask a similar version of the same question now. So this one was the first one that came through from the chat. I'll maybe ask it slightly different to the way it's phrased, but essentially, what lessons have you learned along the journey through the decommissioning? Things that you've seen maybe from one project that you've done that you've carried forward onto others. We all learn things as we go. So this was the first question that came in. So, maybe things that you've seen the first couple of jobs that you now do as a default on the new ones.
Yeah, look, I think early engagement is the key, not only with the owners of the assets, but also through the phase of the project. So if you've got early engagement and get a good understanding of from the bottom up, let's say, I like to look at it from the whole back as well. So wherever this stuff's going to be, disposed outside of what can't be recycled, it's good to look at that early engagement and holistic approach from the start. So you avoid double handling, you avoid inefficiencies, you avoid, measuring once and cutting twice, or let's try and keep it to measure once and cut once. Yep. If we don't understand where it's going to go in the end, then it doesn't make it as efficient of how we cut it to remove it in the first place. That's one of the probably key lessons, I think, for me, throughout some of the projects that we've done.
Yeah, very good. Okay, next one from Chris here. So again, I'll slightly rephrase this one. You talked about sending a couple of vessels to Sakhalin. Chris is saying, any interest, any chance, any appetite, if you like, from yourselves around taking your experience and maybe your vessels to places like Malaysia to support the decom work that they've got coming up there?
100%. Yeah, we're always looking at global, or let's call it geographical expansion outside of Australia. Yeah, sure, that comes with its challenges as well. Australia is probably one of the more expensive countries to operate offshore in, due to certain different layers of things. But yeah, most definitely, we would be super keen. And look, Southeast Asia is on our doorstep. That's one of the real targets for us to grow into. Not only Southeast Asia, but of course, Southeast Asia and up the top of Australia as well, being so close to us around Timor-Leste and PNG.
Yep. You don't even have to change your clock to go to most of those places, do you? It's just...
Yeah. Yep. I think you can get across on pretty much a small dinghy with an outboard if you get further enough up the top there.
Yeah, not far off. No, you wouldn't want to try and do much decom work off a dinghy with an outboard, but I get your point. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. So one now from Sarah, and just a reminder as well, if anyone's got any more questions, please do put them in. This is going in a very different direction. She's curious to know if becoming listed has resulted in you needing to approach work like decommissioning differently, with the different risk profile that comes with that, sitting under an ASX listed business as opposed to a privately held business before that. Is that something you can talk to even?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for us, it's business as usual. We're a 25-year strong marine and subsea solutions company with a huge portfolio of assets. Yeah, sure, it's put a little bit of heightened governance around potential risk in what we do, and that's only benefited the way we operate. Like I said at the start, we're in infancy sort of years of publicly listed world. But yeah, it certainly hasn't changed it negatively. It's really just us getting used to sort of that world. It's interesting to be in it, actually. Because our business hasn't changed, our culture hasn't changed, the way we do things hasn't changed. So, yeah, apart from a little bit more heightened governance around a few things, but no, some of it's allowed us to have, like I said, have a bit more strength in balance sheets to be able to look at potential bigger opportunities that we may have been inhibited to do previously. So it's certainly only been a positive for future growth for us.
Cool. Very good. Thank you. One that sneaked in the Q&A box, this one. So it's good that people are keeping me awake by putting questions in both sides. From a contractor's perspective, are there aspects of Australia's offshore decommissioning regulatory framework that you feel could be improved to make project delivery more efficient? We talk a lot about regulations, and I guess it's always good to get different people's perspectives. So, you mentioned, for instance, the safety case
Mm.
where you're going to de-energized facilities. Either if you had if you had control of the regulations for a day, other things that you think could be tweaked in there.
Oh, look, I mean, for us, yeah, I'd probably tighten the the period as having to do this decom work. We could bundle it up a lot quicker. I
Yep.
mean, what do we got? I think from some of your stats, Francis, there was $50 billion over the next 50 years, but 50% of that will be in the next 10 years. So we're looking at $25 billion in decommissioning in the next 10 years, which is fantastic for an industry and for a business like ours. We would, I'd like to tighten that up, and just to ensure that these projects can't continually sort of go down, go to the right. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I answered that question in its entirety,
That's all right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Everyone's got their own views on these. They're all good. So that's exhausted the questions that people have put in the chat for now. Doesn't mean that there won't be more. I have a couple more that I've jotted down as we were going here. This is something you and I have talked about in the past, and it sort of sits a little outside of Bhagwan, but I know it's an area that you're very interested in personally. Future skills, future workforce, the folks that are going to be on these boats for that next 30, 40 years of decom work that we've got and construction work and so forth. I know you're personally passionate and involved in helping bring people through into the industry. Do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to highlight that could help us, address some of these skills gaps that we talk about into the future?
Yeah, it's a good question, Francis. And Bhagwan, as a business, has struggled with skill shortages in our engineering side of things. Not so much mechanical or subsea engineering, but more so for our vessels. I think average age of vessel engineers is over 60 years of age. So there's certainly those sort of skill shortages and gaps that need to be addressed. But the more niche technical skills in the decommissioning world, I think, is probably not as high as the initial design and the install construction phase, because this is sort of it in reverse. A lot of it's a little bit more, I suppose, rudimentary in its approach, without the odd surprise. But look, I think as an overall skills shortage, I do sit on a board for a non-for-profit called Logistics and Skills Council, and that's what we do in both transport, marine, and other industries. But I think we're going to be battling a little bit. We're going to be looking at trying to upskill a huge workforce to deal with what we've got in defence and nuclear subs and AUKUS around the country. We'll be fighting for wharf space and skills, training up people for that. And as well as, the decom one. I think the decom one, though, is not as specialised as something like, that sector as well. So, look, it's a tricky, not tricky question, but I think the decommissioning industry itself should be fairly resilient for skills, because it is a little more less technical, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with you with that. It was more around the marine skills, I think, and it's interesting to find a sector of an industry where I'm actually the right age demographic now. You said people in their mid-60s. I would be just young on that one now. It's not too bad.
You'd fit in well with our engineering
team.
I
wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't have a clue what I was doing, but I'd at least be the right age. Yes. No.
Exactly. I was just going to say, for our business, our marine skill sets, it doesn't differ in or out of the sectors. We may have specialised crew in a project that will come on board for a project, but as far as our manning our vessels, we can drive a boat in any sector with the same people. They don't need specified skill sets if we're doing a construction job or a decommissioning job. However, of course, the rest of the project team would offer different skills in their experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that, Med. So maybe one last question from me, and this goes back a little bit into some of the earlier slides that you talked about. And again, it's an interest in terms of where technology is taking us into the future. You talked about your looking at converting your boat to more of a hybrid drive, I think, from the one that's got the quartz batteries. And also the autonomous or remotely operated vessel as well.
Mm, mm.
Do you
Yeah.
see those as being real future trends as far as where the industry more broadly, I guess, maybe not necessarily specifically decom, but the industry more broadly is headed?
100%. Yeah, there's a real race for autonomy at the moment. We've got multiple different businesses or companies, both locally and internationally, in that race. We've just done a small project on another one of our vessels, the Narra, which is a small Lions boat. She's 100% electric. She's going to the Port of Melbourne, demonstrate our ability to offer fully electric capabilities. So she should be over in the Port of Melbourne, in the next month or so. I think, we've got other great local service providers and contractors here. Green Room's another great example. We operate green room technology on some of our riverside fleet, as well as we've done work with them as far as autonomous vessel operations. I think that'll span. I think it'll be done first in the point-to-point shipping world with some of these larger ships that will be potentially autonomous. In our world, decom, as left surveys, the ROV world, that becomes extremely appetizing for the client. If we can provide safer and more carbon neutral and of course more cost efficient solutions in survey, and that can be the decom as left survey once we've gone and continue to monitor.
Yep, very good. Thank you. Oh, got another question that's coming. It's great. You'd sometimes think, oh, that's it, and then another one appears. It's wonderful. Thanks for your time. Two questions. So is the Bhagwan Pedro named after you? We had this conversation offline beforehand, but I'll let you answer it again.
Sure. No, it's not. We had two tugboats, the Pedro and the Ando. They were named after a chap, Peter Anderson, who sadly passed away. He was one of our technical superintendents, back in, I think, early 2000s. So we have a few vessels, and I explained to you before this, Francis, we've got some really cool names, I think. Some of our LCTs, we were named after things like Rocker, Roller, the Mover and the Shaker. We've had we've got the George and the Mildred. Our latest vessel, stern landing vessel, the Micah. Unfortunately, one of our valued employees was tragically killed in a road accident on his way to work, and that vessel was named after him. So no, the Bhagwan Pedro is not named after me. But it was named after Peter Anderson. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Thanks for that. And then the second half of this question, are there any particular challenges with bringing marine assets into Australia for decommissioning projects, such as availability, crewing requirements, etc.?
100%. Great question and extremely valid challenge. We've got everything from crewing challenges through to flag challenges, through to importation challenges when we need to get a big boat. Let's say the 120-meter barge, we got that from Eastern's Navigation out of Batam and Singapore. We had to spend a lot of time. We need to, of course, do due diligence for whoever that asset's going to go on charter to. So we need to meet their marine insurance requirements. We need to make sure it's invalid OVID. And then, of course, there's flag issues. If it's not Australian flagged, then you need to man it as per what that vessel's flagged. That can create challenges around exemptions and or reflagging. When we start looking at reflagging a vessel, it's not cheap, and it's not easy. And so, there's definitely challenges. Of course, availability as well, depending on the time of what kind of time in the cycle we're in the industry. Some of these assets just aren't available. Even quite simple assets, or quite what you'd think would be very available assets, like a production supply vessel or a small anchor handler. becomes tricky to get at times. So
Yep.
when you're looking at these large heavy lift barges and things, it certainly can be challenging to get.
Yep. Very good. So that's, for now, the last of the questions. I've got one more, and we'll give people a minute just to see if they've got anything else that they want to put in there as well. What are you most looking forward to going out into the future with decom from yourselves?
I think for us, looking forward to really being able to deliver cost-effective, safe solutions to our valued clients. And like I said, not only our existing energy majors, but also some of the tier one contractors that we work with. But then really packaging that up in a solution that we can do, utilising some of our local port operators, utilising some of our sort of local subsea innovation tooling companies, all the way through to some of our local recyclers and scrappers. So really excited about putting together some of these really robust packages that we can stamp our name on, and really and show the world.
Brilliant. Well, in the absence of any more questions, we'll draw the line at that point. Thank you so much, Peter, for an interesting presentation and great answers to all of those questions as well. I think the thing I'm looking forward to next is going to be catching up with you and a whole bunch of the rest of the industry as well in 2 weeks' time out at the Crown for DNA. I'm looking forward to being on a panel with you, or hosting you on a panel as well, where we get to expand a little bit more on this. And just generally, having conversations with a lot of folks out there. And I'm sure for people on here who have the opportunity, if you like, if you're based in and around Perth, or you're going to be here for the conference, to come and hunt you down over those 2 days if they've got questions that have come to their mind since as well. So look, thank you everybody for joining and for staying with us through a very interesting presentation. Thank you, Peter, so much for taking us through the history of Bhagwan. I'm going to look at the name and the logo in a completely different light now off the back of all of that. No, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And we have another webinar next week. Anybody that wants to come along, feel free, sign up. And next week will be a different host. So you'll get Rianne hosting next week for a journey through the topic of that particular one. Lovely. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and speak to you all soon. Cheers now.
Thanks,
Bye.
Francis. Look forward to seeing you at the DNA conference.